Welcome to the WP Builds podcast, bringing you the latest news from the WordPress community. Now, welcome your hosts, David Wormsley and Nathan Wrigley.
Hello there and welcome to this, the WP Builds weekly WordPress podcast. This is number 167, entitled How I Use Agile and WordPress to Launch a Minimal Viable Product with Marius Vetrici. It was published on Thursday the 20th of February 2020. My name's Nathan Wrigley, and before we begin, I would like to point you to a few bits and pieces that WP Builds do throughout the week. So, for example, we put out a podcast every Thursday. You're listening to it right now. But also on a Monday, we do two things. I produce a WP Builds weekly WordPress news, and I sum up the weekly news for the previous week. It's in audio form, and there are links in the show notes. And also at 2 p.m. UK time, we do a live version of that, and I'm joined on the screen by some notable WordPress people. You can subscribe to the newsletter at wpbuilds.com/subscribe, and if you do that, you will be alerted every time we produce a piece of content. If you want to watch the live version of the show, you can either join our Facebook group at wpbuilds.com/Facebook or go to wpbuilds.com/live at 2 p.m. UK time. All of the links and ways to subscribe can actually be found on one handy page that I've just mentioned, wpbuilds.com/subscribe. There's a couple of newsletters, there's links to our Facebook group and YouTube channels and so on and so forth, so that's a good one. Another thing I'd like to mention, wpbuilds.com/deals. It's a bit like Black Friday, but every day of the week. A searchable and filterable list of WordPress products. You never know, you might be in the market for something this week, and it might well be on that page. So that's wpbuilds.com/deals. The last one I want to mention is wpbuilds.com/advertise. And if you have a WordPress product or service that you would like to put in front of a WordPress specific audience, kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Then go to wpbuilds.com/advertise and you can find out about ways that you can leverage the WP Builds podcast, a bit like ACF have done. Want to build anything with WordPress? With the Advanced Custom Fields plugin by your side, you can take full control of your WordPress edit screens and custom field data. With a few clicks, you can add extra fields to all sorts of admin pages, including posts, taxonomies, users, and now even Gutenberg blocks. They also provide an intuitive PHP API, which makes WordPress development a dream. If you've never tried it, well, now's the time. Visit advancedcustomfields.com/pro. And we do thank Advanced Custom Fields for helping us to put on the WP Builds podcast. Okay, let's get to the podcast proper, shall we? It's episode number 167. It's a chat with Marius Vetrici, and it's all about agile development. I chatted with Marius on a different podcast that I do, as you'll find out, and we got into the subject of whether he should come onto WP Builds and talk about the work that he does with his agency. He's got a sizable agency, and he's had some horror stories in the past in which he's basically bid for work and agreed to do it and then had complete disasters because he didn't really have a grip on the process. And so now he's using Agile to make all of that happen. So we talk about the usual things. We talk about the sprints and the user journeys and how the whole methodology can be deployed very effectively with WordPress as a simple, cheap way of getting a minimum viable product together. It's not something we've really talked about before, and I definitely learnt a lot. And so, without further ado, I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello there, welcome to the WP Builds podcast once more. Thanks for getting to the interview part. I'm talking today to Marius Vetrici. Hi there, Marius.
Hello. Hi, Nathan.
Yeah, thanks for coming on, Marius. This is going to be an interesting chat. Marius and I have actually talked about a really very different subject over on a different podcast that I do, the WP and Up podcast. And over there we talked for maybe 45 minutes about meditation. And after we'd had that chat, we decided it would be nice to do something, let's say, a little bit more WordPressy. So he's come on to WP Builds today. But we've probably been talking for about 40 minutes prior to this, and the conversation was enormously rangy. We talked about all sorts, nothing to do with WordPress, and all sorts of things to do with WordPress. So we really don't know where this conversation is going to go, but Marius strikes me as a very thoughtful, contemplative kind of chap, and so hopefully we'll get into some real interesting stuff. But ostensibly, we are going to be talking about Agile WordPress development. We'll hopefully give you some practical sort of case studies for some of the things that Marius has built in the recent past and so on. And then also we might guide you towards a page where you can find out more from Marius. He's got an ebook which you can download, and maybe if your conversation piques your interest, you can find out more about that as well. But so Marius, let's begin. You've got this post called Agile WordPress Development: How to Maximize the Return on Investment, or ROI, on your MVP website. Do you want to tell us what it was that inspired you to write this lengthy post?
Yeah, it was pain, Nathan. It was the pain of spending a ton of money building the wrong thing.
Yeah, the first line is something. Yeah, it's a jaw-dropping amount of money. I might as well just say it. You spent $200,000 on a product that never took off. That is quite galling, isn't it?
Yes, yeah, it is. Well, it was in my 20s when, if you do outsourcing, your living costs are very low, and you're working as a developer, earning money, then easy come, easy go, But I wish I knew 15 years ago what I know now about listening to customers, listening to prospects, understanding and empathizing with what they need, with their struggles, learning to choose what is a viable idea and what is just an idea that you have when you are having a shower in the morning, and so on.
Just to give it some context, just to lend a bit of I suppose just to understand what it was that went wrong. So you spent $200,000 building a product that never took off. Do you want to give us some very brief insight into what it was that you built and why it didn't take off, now that you've got a little bit of time between you and it?
Yeah, sure. I was working on an inventory management software. The problem that I had is that we've been building this software as anything to everybody. Right. One day, after a couple of months, I think even years of working on it, I looked at all our customers that are using the software, and we had literally 70 different verticals. So there was no focus, no specialization on anything. We've been literally all over the place. Too many features, no focus, no clear messaging. So yeah, everybody would just say, yeah, nice software, user-friendly interface, but this is not for me, because it was like a Swiss knife. It was just too general.
And was this largely born out of the fact that you didn't have a methodology, or was it simply that you were kind of reacting to customer requests, or requesting, we need this feature, and so you would then scurry away and build it, and now we need this feature from a different customer, and so you didn't have that kind of oversight over it or process?
That's precisely how it went. I was very reactive to the requests, the requirements that were coming from our customers, and without a lack of a vision, without knowing exactly where do I want to take this product, it was impossible to say if this request was legit or not. Do we want to do it or not? And with a strategy problem, because we had a business strategy problem, everything else is super hard. Marketing is impossible. Sales are very hard to do because you don't know whom are you targeting. Support was a nightmare. We had like literally hundreds of pages of parameters for how to configure this feature, that feature, and again, I cannot stress the importance of this. Unless I have a very good business strategy in place, everything else is just going to be very hard.
Yeah, I suppose the bottom line is that if you don't know where you're going or what the direction of travel is or where you'd like to end up, let's put it that way, you're going to find it very hard to decline feature requests because you're not sure that the product shouldn't end up like that. Well, that seems like a reasonable request. Let's make the product like that, as opposed to, no. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're not going to add that feature in just yet. We'll stick it on the back burner somewhere, but we're not doing that because we're trying to get to this place instead. Without that oversight and that knowledge, I can imagine that things can easily get out of hand.
That's Alice in Wonderland.
Yes.
If you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there.
Yeah, that's a great way of describing it. So after this sort of calamity, let's describe it as, in your life, you decided to write this article to give people the benefit of your hindsight. So let's go through it then. I suppose that if we're building, so this could equally apply to a website as it could to, a SaaS app or something like that. What are the stages then that you would guide us through if we're about to launch something, we're thinking about launching something, or as you said, we're standing in the shower and the kernel of an idea pops into our head? Where should we begin on this journey?
So that idea, and you will find a link here at the bottom of the podcast to a diagram. It's a Venn diagram. This idea is part of the first circle. It's a bluish circle, what I think the market needs. But where I would proactively start now is I would meet with 5 to 7 people, then interview them and just have a chit chat with them about this particular struggle that I think they have or that I saw they have, because I want to confirm, I want to personally understand how that challenge evolves. What is the daily routine when that challenge occurs? What that person is doing before the challenge occurs? What that person is doing while this challenge occurs? Is that person with somebody else or alone? Is that at home while driving? So specifically in what context? Without personally knowing 3 to 5 or 7 people that have this challenge, I just wouldn't embark nowadays on a new business idea.
So is the idea here you're trying to disassociate the problem that you have and the experience that you have, and you're trying to get an audience of people who you believe have got the same problem and then tease out of them what the actual problem is, not what you think it is, the way you experience it, but the way collectively you all experience it, find some sort of common ground.
Correct. And there's something like 20 years of research done on this topic by a very smart guy called Clayton Christensen. He is the one behind the disrupting innovation theory. But the one I'm mentioning today, it's called the jobs to be done theory. So essentially, while interviewing these people, I should be now looking at the new product or service and looking at it as if that product or service, it's a person that's being hired to do a job, to fulfill a specific job in a specific context. So, for example, people would hire an iWatch for various jobs. Some might hire them to just check their time, but some would hire them for status, for self-image, and that's a completely different job to be done. Some other people would hire an iWatch for getting notified. They need to be on top of their agenda, and so on. And there's a very famous example from his research about the milkshakes. So he discovered that McDonald's milkshakes were hired by single people walking in around 8 a.m. and then just quickly going out. And what they've discovered is people would use these milkshakes while morning commutes because they are super boring and they need to spice up and to sweeten up the morning commute. So this is a very unique job to be done. Yeah. Compared, I need to add this, compared to the same product, seemingly the same physical product, but which is bought by a father walking in during the weekend with his kid. In that particular moment, the job to be done is the father wants to build a relationship with his kid, but then those milkshakes need to be smaller compared to the telecommuting milkshake, because the father or the mother don't want to feel guilty about it. So coming back to your question, looking for jobs to be done, looking for specific areas where people would employ that service or product. So that would be the next step.
Okay. Yeah. I'm following on. Yep.
Yeah. The other thing, very important, and that's the third circle, is what can I afford to build? Depending on the personal resources that one has. And by the way, too much money is not always a good idea.
Yes.
As in my case.
Yeah, as you can demonstrate, yes.
Yeah, I'm a living, walking example. But again, it's important to know what kind of budget do you want to invest in that. So that would be the third circle. And the intersection of those three circles, what I think the market needs, what the market actually needs, and what I can afford to build, I'm calling that small part a minimum viable product, an MVP. So basically an MVP, it's a very simple version of the future product. This very simple version is focusing on just one job to be done, and it's doing it well, and it allows my target market to actually test it and see if this is what they really want.
So the idea is that you're comparing what you think this product needs, what the other people think this product needs, and finally balancing it out with what you can actually afford to spend on it. And those three things combined reveal a much smaller product than you initially began with, or at least that would be the intention. Something much smaller, much more confined, much more limited in scope. And that is where you should begin, not the other way around. You shouldn't start building this product until you've got those valuable bits of data under your belt.
Yeah, and I've got some figures from folks we are working with and doing product strategy advisory for them. They are saying product coding itself, it's around 30% of the effort. The rest is marketing and product strategy.
It's interesting.
So what I'm saying here is, if this part with like coding, the coding part is, it's complex, it's engineering, it's, oh my God. Well, wait until the next step, until you actually need to ensure you have a business and not a mere product.
So where does this fit? Where does this fit then into WordPress, if you like? So does this exact same philosophy that you've got here, this MVP and the Venn diagram, which probably, by the way, you should pause this and go and look at the Venn diagram, because it's hard to understand what we're talking about unless you've seen that, and very simple to understand had you have seen it. This could apply to a website, for example, that you're building. Obviously, if it's a simple brochure website with 2 pages, perhaps this is a bit overkill. But if you're going to be building something complicated, maybe a complicated e-commerce store, or something brand new that the internet has never seen before, you're suggesting that WordPress is a good place to be with this, because it affords you the ability to build things much more quickly than if you start from scratch because of its plugin architecture.
Yes, I think WordPress, it's a gold gem. It has a huge opportunity as a platform for quickly building and launching a new MVP of a new SaaS, software as a service, or an online service. People are using WordPress. There's already a a wave of people using WordPress to build niched clones of Airbnb, of Uber, of Udemy, Upwork, and so on. But instead of spending millions like those big companies did, you can launch something very quickly in just 60 days by leveraging the WordPress plugin ecosystem. So this combination between the WordPress ecosystem and the very lean and agile approach, this is what I dubbed agile WordPress development.
So in your case, you have direct experience of this. You have in fact built platforms which in the end have got nothing to do with WordPress. An example which comes to mind, and I can't remember which one it is, but there was one where you used WordPress to launch, to get feedback, to put a minimum set of features out using off-the-shelf plugins, maybe premium, maybe free, I don't know. And then after you'd gained that feedback, it then gave you a starting point where you began building it. I think it was Laravel that you mentioned. And so WordPress at that point was no longer required, but it gave you the data that you needed, the feedback that you needed to judge whether this was a goer or not.
Yeah, that's a good example. You can start with WordPress, and I would suggest looking at this project, WordPress-based project, for a time window of 1 to 2 years.
Right.
In 1 or 2 years, there's enough time to test the idea, to get some traction, and most importantly, to start making some money. When the business is taking off and you are able to reinvest it, then you can reevaluate based on where business is going. Is WordPress still a good solution? And it might be still a good solution. There are very, very large websites that are running WordPress after years and years, or you might want to switch to a custom-based solution, a more low-level technology. It could be Laravel, but it also could be .NET or Java.
Yeah. It's interesting because you on the article that I'm going to link to first, we talk about how an MVP will maximize your return on investment. So that's all the stuff that we've talked about thus far. And then you give 3 examples, which I presume are examples that you yourself and your company have built. One was a website called caregivercareers.com, where it started out on WordPress. And then you put in WooCommerce subscriptions. It didn't take a lot of time, but this was a successful business. And then it went on to use WordPress for the website, but the subscriptions went over to Infusionsoft. So that was an example where it all worked swimmingly. Then there was another one where you have luxurybuystoday.com, social CRM website. You built it off WordPress just for a fast launch. Again, got lots of data. And then it was decided to move that project over to Laravel. So, by that point, you've gathered all the features that you need and you've decided what you don't need and so on. And then also, interestingly, you mentioned one called Baba, BABAA.me, which was a WordPress-powered concierge service. And quite interestingly, that one just simply didn't work. There was no traction. And so it was shut down before the spend got too much. This is what you talked about right at the beginning about the $200. This is the message to learn here. This one it's not working. We've spent a very small amount of money on it. We've used WordPress to do that. It's not working. Let's shut it down, move on, come up with a different idea. So there are 3 solid examples that you can point to that you've been involved in to justify this as an approach.
Yeah, and well, the figures are there. Around 7 or 8 out of 10 new businesses will fail within the first 5 years. So why not fail fast and as convenient as possible?
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Yeah.
But to give our listeners more inspiration, let's look at those businesses that are still live and kicking. And by the way, the MVP approach, the Agile WordPress development approach, is going very well hand in hand with recurring revenue businesses. And there are so many interesting business models out there. And There's another article that lists, I think, 9 case studies. For example, one of them, it's a clone of Udemy, where a piano teacher is teaching piano lessons online. It's a French website, so the lessons are taught in French, but nevertheless, it's alive and kicking, and there are recurring subscriptions being paid by all those who want to learn. And then there's a very interesting example called Askademic with ASK, askademic.com. This is an online platform that connects teachers to students. It's like an Uber for teachers and students.
Nice.
WordPress powered. And then there's a very interesting membership website, but this one is more similar to thinkthe House, where you come in and learn stuff. But these guys, the guys from beautycoach.com, they are educating makeup artists and stylists on the latest techniques, on latest beauty and makeup techniques. Yeah. Then there are job websites, like clones of Monster. Then there's a real boom of marketplaces, clones of Uber or Fiverr, of Upwork. You will find in the article jobalter.com and so on. And yeah, last but not least, you've probably heard about the dollarshaveclub.com. So basically websites that are delivering on a regular basis some physical stuff to your door.
Yeah.
And we have here an example that would deliver you coffee from ferriscoffee.com. In the past, we've worked on a website which would deliver toothbrushes.
Oh, wow. That's really niche. Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's the niche for dog food and dog treats being delivered to your door. Yeah. It's very interesting.
So you believe that WordPress is a good place to start these things out. By the way, I will link down in the show notes to the 9 resources that Marius has just been talking about. They're all laid bare in an article that he's written, and subscription comes through very strongly. But you believe that in certain situations, WordPress is the perfect place to begin this journey because of its plugin architecture and the fact that a lot of the code has been written for you. Because, as you said, although it's not all of the cost, it is a significant amount. Maybe 30% will be during the product's life cycle. It might be on coding. But you also sound some alarm bells because clearly if you're using plugins, you're not necessarily going to get everything that you want out of it because it's not designed specifically for your exact platform. The needs that you need may not be in there. But also you sound the alarm that some plugins are, well, to be blunt about it, better than others.
Yeah, some plugins are more equal than others. Because plugins have been written by human beings with various degrees of skills and knowledge. So yeah, by leveraging the plugin ecosystem, we can think about it as of a Lego. If you have a Lego for assembling a plane and a Lego for assembling and a Lego set for assembling a helicopter, you can probably assemble maybe a rocket or something along the lines if you're a kid and you like to play with that. But if you try to maybe assemble, I don't know, something like
I'm going to say the Millennium Falcon.
Yeah, the Millennium Falcon. It might be a bit further, and then you might need a bit of paper and glue and other things. So exploring this metaphor, it's about using and choosing the right plugins, and I'll get back to that in a second. But besides the right plugins, you need to wire them up. Every business obviously every business is unique, and those plugins are solving some general patterns, some general jobs to be done. In your particular case, you'll use plugin A, B, C, for example. You'll use WooCommerce subscriptions and WooCommerce memberships, but then you want the lessons, and that's a very specific example. You want the lessons, your lessons on your membership website, to be published, even if you've signed up during the month that a lesson was published, but you've signed up after the lesson was published. Or maybe you would like to give access to all the lessons that have been published during that year, just as an incentive. So these kind of small things, small variations in your business process will require some custom plugin development. For this, you will need a WordPress expert that will be knowledgeable, that will have some credentials, that will respect the WordPress coding standards, and that will create a new plugin. In no case he should change the code of existing plugins. That's a big no. So he will create a new plugin, a new custom plugin that will basically wire up together, glue up together those features that you already have.
And have you found this approach to be very successful then? You've used WordPress, and I guess the answer is yes, because you're writing these articles about it, but you still do this. If somebody comes with a very elaborate plan, your first port of call is WordPress and a trusted bank of plugins that you found to be reliable, stable, easy to work with, highly updated, and so on.
Could you please repeat your question, Nathan?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So I was just saying this is something that you still do to this day. And what I mean by that is you've written this article, about doing it this way. You still espouse this. You still think this is the way to do it. Begin with WordPress just because there's a value, there's a saving in it because you get that part for free. Use some cheap plugins. This is always the solution. I think that's basically my question. Is this always the way that you begin, or are there any situations where you say, look, forget it, just start with Laravel, start by coding it from scratch? Are there any situations where WordPress maybe isn't the right fit?
So WordPress, as any other tool, it is good to a certain extent. And if your particular project is a very custom, super custom project, and there is no plugin that would remotely resemble what are you trying to do, then maybe you just want to hand code that from scratch, because customizing an existing plugin would probably take you as much time as it would take you to build it from scratch.
So you reckon that 2 years is a decent amount of time for this MVP website to be up and running before you decide what to do? In your experience, after that 2 years has passed, I mean, it seems that some people carry on using WordPress, other people, there's clearly an economic advantage to keeping this service going. I suppose at that point you just have to look at the data and work out whether the cost of having it built from scratch at that point is actually worth it, or can we sort of muddle through with WordPress rather than having something utterly completely bespoke?
Yes, the numbers will show you what would be the best decision at that moment. One thing that needs to be taken into account with WordPress, and that's, I might say, shady and dark side of WordPress, and I still we talk about this with our customers, is, yeah, very nice, you have a quick and quickly rising curve of launching this product using WordPress. But the more plugins you will add to your website and the more paper and glue you would add to your website, the harder down the road it will be to maintain that website. And by that, what I mean is, if you, in plain words, if you have 5 plugins on your website and one custom plugin that's gluing them up together, and then you need to update those plugins, it will be one effort. to make sure the website is still working after the update. But if you, God forbid, have 50 plugins, 50, and you update all the plugins, then chances that something will break up, chances that there will be an incompatibility between those plugins down the road are very, very high. And the reality shows that it's it's a good KPI to look at the number of WordPress plugins that you have, so that if you probably hit more than a number of more than, I would say, just from out of my head, more than 20, you should probably thinking seriously about reducing the number or switching to a more custom approach, which could involve taking out 5 or 7 plugins and just coding your own plugin, coding only a set of those features for your own use, so that you don't have to constantly update those. Yeah. Or you might consider a full rewrite. Well, a full rewrite, it's risky in itself. It has its own risks, but again, based on the numbers and the profitability that you have, that might make sense.
Let's turn the conversation around a little bit and talk about the notion of agile. This is a term which crops up all the time, and the audience that we have, I'm sure many people will have a deep and very granular understanding of what agile development means, whether that's with WordPress or anything else. But I'm sure there are many people who are freelance, who just build websites with WordPress for themselves and have perhaps never encountered this apart from hearing about it. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind explaining your understanding of what agile development means in the specific context of WordPress, I suppose.
Sure. It's a methodology that we put up together by getting inspiration from Scrum methodology with Kanban. Essentially, being agile in my view means to work in short sprints and to deliver tangible results at the end of every sprint. A sprint is essentially a bucket of man hours. It's a budget of man hours that somebody is allocating. A sprint could be anything between 2 weeks, maybe 4 weeks. It's not recommended to go with more. And basically, for every sprint, you need to decide what features, what more specifically user stories would you like to have. And the user stories have a very specific format. The user story is like a theme-sliced feature describing what has to be achieved. For example, as registered visitor, I want to filter the events by starting date and end date, because that will allow me to quickly find the events I want to go to.
Does it always follow that exact that pattern? The sentence is always the same. I can't exactly repeat it to you, but because I am such and such, I want to do this because. It is always that exact way of phrasing it.
There's a reason for this recommendation. The first component of this sentence is the role. And when I'm saying the role, I mean the user role. There could be anonymous users, there could be registered users, there could be, for example, there could be teachers as a role on a platform, there could be admins, and there could be pupils. Or on another platform, there could be doctors and patients. Okay?
Yep.
So as a user role, then I want to. That's the goal, the desire. So that the benefit. The benefit is important because it allows one to connect with the job to be done and the broader view, the higher purpose of this seemingly tiny feature. One specific characteristic of a user story is, I'm repeating myself, but it's important to make it thin sliced. So imagine you have a multi-layered cake, a real cake with chocolate, with cream, with strawberries, and then you are cutting from top to bottom a thin slice of this feature. So these layers are all the layers from the user interface going to the data layer, which is the cream between the cake layer, and going as far as down as to the database fields, which are the strawberries at the bottom
I like it.
of the cake. So very important, a user story it doesn't add a new page. It won't add a huge feature, an entire calendar. A user story will just add a new field, one or two fields, but from top to bottom across the entire system. Why is this important? Because after a user story is delivered, it needs to be it should be testable. It needs to be deployable. So you could potentially put it live and let your users test it. And why it's important again, the ask why, ask why 3 times to get to the root cause. This is important because it's so easy to get delusional about what your market actually needs. And the faster you can get real feedback, the faster you can connect with the reality, with real people, real needs, the better your decisions will be. So that's how they reinforce each other.
So is the idea then to collect a whole bunch of these user stories with, as you say, very thinly sliced, nothing too transformational, just a little tiny amendment that we could make, phrase it in this correct way, and then gather up a dozen, half a dozen, 20, 30, whatever that number might be, of these user journeys, and then in some way kind of prioritize them and see what's going to deliver the most value back to the platform. That might be, I suppose, in terms of return, financial return, or ease of use, or whatever it might be, and then in some way order them, put them in, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and so on, and then work on the one which somehow manages to float to the top.
Nobody has an infinite budget. Even though who think they have an infinite budget, they better set a cap. They would better set a limit on it. And what you're saying now, it's called a product backlog. In my early years, I was doing just the way you would describe it. I would collect everything there, any idea that would pop up or that would come from a customer, I would just collect it on our product backlog. Mm-hmm. And then when we would plan the next sprint, we would choose just the right amount of features that would go into the sprint backlog. Mm-hmm. This is very similar to having a rucksack or a backpack and trying to fill it with rocks. Imagine you have a huge pile of rocks and you just need to take just the right amount of rocks in order to maximize the volume, the carrying capacity of that rucksack, of that backpack. It's a classical computer science challenge and problem. Yep. And coming back to agile discussion, nowadays, and probably more inspired from Days Camp's methodology and their new book, which, by the way, really recommend you read. It's called Shape Up. These guys would filter even their product backlog through their vision. So something won't even land in their product backlog if they know they're not going to implement that thing ever.
Right. That's just to keep it off the table, keep your mental bandwidth available.
They are keeping it in the memory of their customers.
Right.
That is to say, if something is really important for enough customers, it will keep getting back to us, and then we will look at it through the jobs to be done lens and see if there's a job that needs to be fixed there. But otherwise, collecting user stories on your product backlog is healthy. Just filter them through your product vision. Where do you want to take this product in 1 or 2 years? And then before a sprint would start, obviously one needs to fill in the rucksack, the backpack with rocks. So we need to choose just the right amount of features that would go into that sprint. And the way we help our customers do that is we ask them this one question, which is, how much money do you think this feature will bring you within the next 12 months?
Nice.
And then they would rank the amount of money with something like 1 to 10. And that is the value that they will be getting. Now, as a next step, we come in and we say, we basically rank the features by indicating if this feature is a low complexity, medium, or high complexity feature. And we can even assign some monetary values, so low, medium, and high. But essentially, when you see a list of user stories with these two fields, low, medium, high, being the first one, so the complexity, and the other one being the value that they'll be getting, you can easily spot and you can even sort those features which would return the maximum value but will require the least amount of effort. Obviously, if you have a membership website and you think, oh, it would be great to add a one-on-one coaching feature for our members to use to get some coaching and to pay for it. And if that's a high complexity feature that would take 10 grand to build, but then the return on investment for that feature is within the next year probably around 3 out of 10, then you would probably be better off with 5K feature, which will be 10 out of 10 in terms of return on investment. This is like a very quick tool that helps separate the waters. What goes to the left, what goes to the right, what goes into the next sprint, what stays for later.
Yeah, I mean, it's really it's like an ingenious method. I was just wondering if the return on the investment against the complexity is in your experience, is that always the best way of filtering these things, or sometimes is there another factor other than return on investment? So, for example, I don't know, the convenience that it might bring, or the time spent on the website might increase as a result of this particular action. Or do you always, in your setup, judge it against actual dollars returned?
I encourage the customers to think about returned dollars, because even if there's an intermediary goal like time on website or lower bounce rate or lower user churn rate, at the end of the day that will still translate into a monetary value. And like it or not, these people are doing a business. They are taking some money out of their family, their kids, their investors, their banks, and investing. And every feature, that might sound obvious, but every feature that you are building will mean some dollars. Every dollar you would save will go into your profit. If you will save $5 on this feature, at the end of the year, you'll have $5 extra profit. This is like a very simple and obvious thing, but me personally, maybe some others, we tend to forget about this from time to time.
So when you're doing this, you advise fairly short sprints, anywhere between, I can't remember what you said, was it a few weeks up to possibly a month or so?
It could be between. We are doing sprints of 5 days. It could be sprints of 2 weeks, or maybe 1 month. I would not go with more than 1 month.
Okay. And is there any scope for doing things concurrently? So, for example, are you lining up the next sprint as you're approaching the end of the current sprint, or do you always reach the end of the sprint before you will even begin work on the next one?
We are collecting the ideas into the backlog, if they are worth keeping, worth collecting. But other than that, we focus on the current sprint because it's so easily to get distracted by shiny things.
Yeah. I was just wondering if you had any. Obviously, you've come up with a lot of this stuff that works for you, but presumably at various points along your journey, discovering how all this works for you, you've taken some insights from other people. I'm wondering if you could point us in the direction of maybe some author. Apart, you mentioned Basecamp and all the work that they do, but maybe some author or resource, website, whatever it might be, where we could find out more. Obviously, we'll be linking to your own articles over at wpriders.com, but something aside from that.
Sure. Actually, we are going to publish a series of articles. They are based on some learning, practical stuff and research and books. First thing first, I would recommend Adele Rivela's book, Buyer Personas, because she is literally giving out scripts, methodology, texts, phone calls, how to approach customers, prospect customers, and how to understand what typology, what persona are those customers. Then, as a next step, I would go with Clayton Christensen's book, Competing Against Luck, which goes into great details about the jobs to be done theory. And I will give you links about that. Yeah. The next thing, once you know whom are you talking to and what problem do you want to fix for them, the next thing I would focus on is clarify the story brand book with the subtitle Clarify Your Message So Customers Would Listen.
Okay. That sounds good.
Story brand book. It's by Donald Miller.
Okay.
And lastly, there's a very, very good research paper about business strategy, which I find it very practical. I will give you the link. It's a research paper entitled in a very suggestive way, "Are you sure you have a strategy?" And
that sums it up.
There will be again an article as part of this business and product strategy series that I will post under the podcast. But essentially, a strategy has 5 components. Number 1, economic logic. How are we going to make money, or what job are we going to serve, to fulfill? That's my addition and the link with the jobs to be done. But I see the jobs to be done at the core of the strategy. Mm-hmm. And then is where the arenas, where are we going to compete? That is, what kind of categories, segments, geographical areas, product types. Next, we need to think about the vehicles. That's the next component. So the vehicles will tell us how do we get there, the channels. Do we go through franchises? Do we go through partnerships? Do we go directly? And so on. The next one, very important, is the differentiators. And essentially, that's the answer to the question, how am I going to win there at that game? And lastly, the staging. The staging shows how fast should I go there to that market, or in what steps it's not all the businesses want you to go everywhere at once. For example, Uber, they've launched initially in USA, and they went to this country and then to that country. But some companies, I know from some specific case studies, they just failed because they went too fast to too many countries. So they had a good strategy, but they were weak at the staging part.
It's a really fascinating area. I know that sadly you've got to go in a couple of minutes, so we are going to have to wrap things up. But as a freelancer, it's not something that I've particularly delved into a great deal. You know, I've read a few of the things that you're mentioning and tried to get a grip on it and what have you. But I'm sure that for a lot of our audience, this will be just really an intriguing discussion. And those people who obviously are doing this stuff on a day-to-day basis, you know, maybe some of those books that you've mentioned and articles are new to them. Where can we actually find you, though? Should somebody be interested in chatting to you and following up something that you've just mentioned? Have you got any Twitter handles or website contact forms that you want to point us to?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I can be found at wpriders.com. That's in one word. It's the agency I'm running. It's a 12-people agency, and we are doing advanced WordPress development projects. And then I can be found on Twitter or LinkedIn. Just Google my name.
Okay. Marius, fascinating. I feel like we've just begun this chat and yet we're having to end it. So I like a million more questions and things that I could talk about. But for now, that's really all that both you and I have got time for. So thanks for joining us today. And I hope that people will get in touch and follow you up in some way, shape or form and keep the conversation going. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me, and I wish you a lot of success with launching new businesses and new platforms.
Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed that episode. I certainly learned an awful lot. I have to say, this is not an area that I would rate myself as in any way an expert. So it was nice chatting to Marius all about this kind of stuff. And like I say, I learned a lot. He's very calm and he delivers his solutions in a really clear, thoughtful way. The WP Builds podcast is brought to you today by WP and Up. 1 in 4 of us will be directly affected by mental health related illness. WP and Up supports and promotes positive mental health within the WordPress community. This is achieved through mentorship, events, training and counselling. Please help enable WP and Up by visiting wpandup.org/give. Okay, as I said at the top of the podcast, please head over to wpbuilds.com, our website. Over there, you're going to find a ton of information about the stuff that we do. So there's the podcast that you're listening to, 2 things on a Monday, the news and the live news, and all sorts of other things in between. I'm going to fade in some cheesy music, as I always do, and hopefully we'll see you at some point this week. And if not, I'll see you next week. Bye-bye for now.